Right. Hi, everyone. I'm back, and I'll have Dr. Hoesung Lee joining me virtually. Sir, can you hear me?
Yes, Ravi, I can hear you. Right.
Okay, wonderful. Well, we've got a packed audience here in DC, and we've got many people from around the world listening in, so thank you for sharing your time. Already this morning here in Washington, in our discussions, the IPCC's report has come up and been cited. And it strikes me that every single year we imagine that things possibly couldn't get any worse, and yet each report seems to suggest that things are more dire than they were the year before, and we're still not on track to meet any of the commitments we've made. Just talk us through very quickly this latest report. If you can describe, how much of a jump it is from previous reports in terms of, the dire findings that you've come up with.
Well, okay, thank you. First of all, I want to emphasize that the impacts, our previous report, which was a previous assessment report, which was released 7 years ago, the impact we projected at the time turned out to be much more optimistic based upon our latest assessment released just this year and last year. And in fact, with every increment of the warming, the risks turned out to be much severer, and that will continue to be our projection for the rest of the century. And also we found that as you know, the world has experienced a great deal of the extreme weather events. It's really unacceptable, the extreme events. And we found that much of those extreme weather events could not be explained without this factor of human-caused climate change. That was a very significant departure of our understanding of the climate system from our last assessment report. At that time, we established that the impacts of extreme weather impacts had relation to the human-caused climate change, but we were not quite sure of the extent of such impact. But this time, the science has improved, and we were able to narrow that uncertainty range.
And that's really important.
At the same time, yes, go ahead.
It's really important, Dr. Lee, because when we look at crises around the world, we've already talked about Pakistan today, wildfires in so many other parts of the world. It's important to be able to make that connection. I want to ask you a little bit more about that, but one more thing related to this. There was some controversy over the report. It was delayed by several months. And I know, of course, your term ends in July. I'm not sure yet whether you are seeking another term. Just very quickly, so we can be clear on that. Are you seeking another term once it ends in July? And can we expect the report, this year's report, to be on time? If it's timed for COP28?
Oh, okay. First of all, I'm not seeking another term, although there are some countries who want me to run, but I'm not seeking another term. And the report of this cycle, which is known as the sixth assessment report, ended. That report released the 21st of March this year, and that report is known as synthesis report. In fact, that report integrated and synthesized all the six assessment reports that released in this period. And so the key informations contained in that report includes those couple of key findings I just elaborated. And also we indicated that there were those, improvement in the actions taken in various sectors and also various policy areas. However, as many of you indicated, that it's not sufficient at all to limit the global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius.
So let me ask you this. So much of the data that has emerged in the last few years has been important, as you said, in drawing the connection between climatic events we see and being able to tie them to human emissions. As someone who's overseeing the IPCC's work, what data do you wish you had? So the data that doesn't exist, but that you wish you had.
Well, that's a wonderful question. And in fact, there were so many data that we wish to have. At the same time, there are so many data that we really wish to understand the meaning of those. So those two things really exist. And I want to say this too, to you all. And in the last assessment 7 years ago, the authors at that time tried to understand the benefit side of climate action versus the cost aspect of the climate action. And the ranges regarding the benefit of the climate action was so large. Therefore, the uncertainty was so large compared to the cost aspect of the climate mitigation. Therefore, at that time, the authors were indeterminate, making a definite statement about the cost benefit of action. And they were saying that they were not sure of making a definite statement because of this uncertainty. However, they were sure that a much more relevant comparison will be a risk versus risk. That means risk of action versus risk of inaction. And there, the authors were very confident that risk from no action would be significantly higher than risk from action. And that much said during at the conclusion of the fifth assessment report. That was 7 years ago. At this time, the authors were able to say that the benefit of taking action for limiting the warming to 2 degrees Celsius clearly does it is more than the cost of mitigation activities. Therefore, it is very much worthwhile to pursue the climate stabilization at 2 degrees Celsius, and that was one of the key findings the authors could achieve.
I can tell you, Dr. Lee, as a journalist, these benchmarks are really important for us because we're able to use data to then call politicians to account or to compare between countries, what various countries are doing or the impacts that it'll have in various parts of the world. Now that the science is clear, it's undeniable, the linkages are clear, we have to move towards action. Everyone knows that. That's what much of our event today has been about. What are you hoping in terms of action to see this year from COP28?
Well, the important point is we need to look at the immediate actions. What can the countries do for the next step in this journey to the climate neutrality, zero? And people love to talk about 2030 and 2050. But point is, can the world achieve peaking of global greenhouse gases as soon as possible? Now, this report says that at the latest peaking time could be 2025. It used to be much earlier than that, but somehow, as we assessed literature, this peaking time somewhat helpful for us, but anyway, it now turned out to be 2025. So we really keep focus our mind on what should we do worldwide, should we do to reduce emissions as early as possible. Now, as you know very well, during the COVID period, the carbon emissions declined 7%, and at the same time, because of the world lockdown, global GDP reduced 3% by 3%. Now, the journey to the climate neutrality by 2050 means that we will have to achieve 7% reduction in the CO2. At the same time, world GDP should grow somewhere around between 2 to 3%. So it's an entirely different story that we experienced during the COVID period. So it is a challenge, but I think that should be the picture of the climate stabilization and climate neutrality we are talking for 2050.
Well, we'll keep using your data to hold countries and companies to account. Dr. Hoesung Lee, you are the chair of the IPCC. We rely on your data. Thank you for joining us. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much.